Welcome to Module 1, Lesson 2. Today's AP English language focus is analyzing how word choice reflects a writer's understanding of the audience. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over upcoming classes for AP English. I've had a couple questions from students regarding what will we be studying and how we'll be approaching this through eSchool. Throughout the next couple of weeks, we are going to be preparing for the May 20th at-home AP English exam. And as you know from last lesson, the AP English exam is given at home. It'll be 45 minutes, and you will write a rhetorical analysis essay. So these lessons will focus on improving our analysis and earning the sophistication point on our AP English rubric. So here I have the AP English rubric, but I have the sophistication row, which is row C. Now, in our previous classes, we've all kind of focused on the row A, the thesis, and row B, the evidence and commentary, which we're going to continue to work on. But I know there's been a lot of frustration around row C for sophistication because it's one of those points that it's like the unicorn of points, right? Like how do we even, is this point even real? How do we obtain this point? And so I'm going to go over what doesn't earn the point, and then we're going to talk about like how we can go about trying to earn that point today. So the first thing I just want to note is that many students don't earn this point because they attempt to contextualize the text, but such attempts consistently, predominantly involve sweeping generalizations. And so maybe they do identify how the author is using like diction or how the author is using a historical allusion, but then they kind of generalize, well, this would just make the audience feel like this, without taking enough time to ask the right questions and to probe deeper into a more complex understanding. So we're going to focus this lesson on obtaining this point. Like we're going to take some steps to figure out, well, how can we obtain this point? But we really need to focus on earning the point through a complex understanding of the rhetorical situation, which is what we focused our last lesson on as well. So notice you can earn this point through 3 different ways. We're going to focus on the first way, explaining the significance or relevance of the writer's rhetorical choices given the rhetorical situation across the sources. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we covered in our last class. Today's lesson really builds off that last class, so you're still going to need to know what you answered in our last class's mastery check, and you're going to need the Abigail Adams letter because we're still going to be using that today in our class. So last class we looked at the prompt. We took time to deconstruct the prompt to determine elements of the rhetorical situation, and we analyzed specific sections of the letter for the rhetorical situation. The rhetorical situation is another way of saying who is the writer, who is the audience, why is the writer writing this, what context do we have, like what time period is this written in, and again, why is the author, like what's the purpose of the actual piece of writing and what is the message. So here is an overview from our last lesson. We know that the writer was Abigail Adams, who is John Quincy Adams' proud, loving mother. And we know that her audience is her son, John Quincy Adams. She was writing this because she knew John Quincy Adams is reluctant about being in France with his father, who is a U.S. diplomat. Some of the context that we have is that she wrote this in 1780, and she tells her son that he is an eyewitness of these calamities, and she references the tyranny, the war that he is an eyewitness to. And so we can infer that this is written right after the Revolutionary War. The purpose, Abigail Adams, his mother, wants to convince him that it is a valuable experience, that he should be actively engaging in the experience. So as we know a little bit more about the audience too, he was really reluctant to travel, and yet so she's trying to encourage him to take advantage of this opportunity and gain more experience. Her message is, this experience, though difficult, will be building the character of a hero and a statesman. So last class, we took time to come up with that after reading the prompt, and we came up with a basic summary of the rhetorical situation, which you see highlighted here. Abigail Adams, a mother, wants her son, who is on a journey abroad, John Quincy Adams, to understand her views on the value of experience. She crafts a letter to her son in order to convey this position and convince him to believe it as well. This is an adequate summary, but it is vague. So your job was to take this summary and to make it stronger. So yes, this identifies the speaker, Abigail Adams. We know that she's a mother. Her overall message, which is she's trying to communicate the value of experience, and her audience. We know a little bit about her son, John Quincy Adams. So, but our job was to revise this paragraph again to make it stronger. So we're not just touching on audience, speaker, and message. We're touching more on the context, the purpose, and delving deeper into the rhetorical situation. So our goal is to have a complex understanding of the rhetorical situation. I want you to look at these two samples, and we're going to decide which of these two samples best accomplishes that goal. After reading these two samples, you're going to pause the video, you're going to go to Google Classroom, and you're going to respond to at least one peer following this. So go ahead right now, read the two samples, pause the video, then you're going to go to Google Classroom, you're going to click on question, where you will see this, you're going to answer it, and then you'll be able to respond to a peer to say whether you agree or disagree. Welcome back. If you were here in the video, this means that you've already answered the question in Google Classroom and you've taken time to read through some of your peers' answers and responded to one of your peers' answers. For the comparison, we're going to take a look at sample B and sample C. Sample B, though John Quincy Adams has encountered struggles on his journey abroad, his caring mother composes her letter to reinforce that the challenges he is facing are worthwhile experiences and will benefit him. Sample C. While Abigail Adams acknowledges John Quincy Adams' reluctance to travel abroad, she writes a letter reinforcing that the challenges he is facing will ultimately make him a better thinker, statesman, and citizen, which is what she desires of her son. Now, both of these are much better than our sample A because they're going more in depth about the rhetorical situation. They give us more explicit details than sample A, which was our earlier summary. There are a couple of differences, however. You see that John Quincy Adams has a, quote, reluctance, and we see that here, reluctance to travel abroad, whereas in sample B, it says that he struggles. So we learn more about the audience, John Quincy Adams, in sample C. We learn more about our writer, Abigail Adams, as well. In sample B, it just says caring mother. We see that in green here. Whereas in sample C, we see that he is acknowledging his, or she is acknowledging his reluctance. So we see that she's more sympathetic and that she desires her son to be a better thinker, statesman, and citizen. So we are getting more of the purpose, the exigence, the writer, the audience in sample C. It takes time to be more specific, and so that is why sample C is the stronger of the two. Sample C is still not perfect. It still does not address the context, so we could even make sample C a stronger summary of the rhetorical situation. Today, our focus is writers' choices regarding syntax, and we know syntax means sentence structure, and diction means word choice. So writers' choices regarding syntax and diction influence how the writer is perceived by an audience and may influence the degree to which an audience accepts an argument. So while last class we focused on identifying elements of the rhetorical situation, today we are going to determine rhetorical choices, in this case diction, so language choices that help to convey that argument. Before we get started looking at the Abigail Adams letter, again, I do want to give us a quick example of something we've covered in the past, word choice. We know that language conveys meaning. And when we are thinking about why the author is using a specific word, we really need to consider the denotation and the connotation. And the denotation is the dictionary definition. The connotation is like the emotional association with that word. So here's an example taken from another AP English exam. The Mississippi never lies at rest. It roils. We know that the denotation here of roils is to stir up, disturb, or disorder. And so that's the denotation. That's the dictionary definition of this word. But given extra context and given the connotation of this word, the connotation means to constantly be moving, to be alive. And we see that that's what this author is meaning, because the Mississippi never lies at rest. So the use of royals here is really just connoting that it's constantly in motion. So when we are analyzing an author's use of language, we really need to consider the rhetorical situation, especially if we're going to understand the complexity of the text. If we're going to show that we should earn that sophistication point, because we can not only talk about the meaning of the word, but we can talk about how it relates back to the author, or the speaker, the audience, the context. Here, I'll list these out. So when we're considering the rhetorical situation, we're thinking about how does this word, what does it reveal more about the writer or the audience, the exigence, the context, the purpose, or the message. So when analyzing a specific rhetorical move, like diction and author's use of word choice, we want to apply that move to the rhetorical situation. So we would want to ask ourselves these questions. If we're thinking about why the author used that specific word, we want to ask ourselves, what does this example suggest about the writer's values, beliefs, or needs? To tie it to audience, which is another element of the rhetorical situation, we would want to ask ourselves, what does this example suggest about the audience's values, beliefs, or needs, about the writer's perception of those values? Why might it be so persuasive? For exigence, what does this example illuminate about why the text was written? Remember that exigence is why is it written. Context, what does this example illuminate about the time in which the text was written? Purpose, how does this example relate to the writer's purpose? How does it contribute to the purpose? And message, how does this example relate to the writer's message? What does it illuminate about the subject? Today, for time's sake, we are only focusing on the circled elements of the rhetorical situation. So we're going to be needing to ask ourselves these questions for writer, audience, and purpose. And so let's get started. For practice analyzing a text or the author's use of language and how it applies to the rhetorical situation, today you're going to read 3 sections of the Abigail Adams letter. And we're going to be closely reading these sections or these examples. We're going to be analyzing how the author's use of language contributes to the reader's understanding of the writer, the audience, and the purpose. And so what I would like for you to do right now is you're going to pause the video and you are going to attempt number 1 on your own. And so number 1 is this first square here. I'm going to read it to you, and then you are going to try to identify, well, what does this reveal about the writer, the audience, and the purpose. It will be expected of you, my son, that as you are favored with superior advantages under the instructive eye of a tender parent, your improvement should bear some proportion to your advantages. Nothing is wanting with you but attention, diligence, and steady application. Nature has not been deficient. So notice that the highlighted text in blue, that is what you're zooming in on. So how does the word choice in this highlighted text, what does it reveal about the writer and the writer's beliefs, needs, and the audience's beliefs and needs, and the purpose? You may now pause the video and attempt number 1. Okay, I have moved the format to this OneNote just so I am able to annotate on the passage and also show you the questions that we're going to use to guide our thinking. So you should have attempted this on your own. If you have not, I really encourage you to pause the video and do that. But we're going to read this one more time, and then we're going to think about how the word choice pertains to the writer, the audience, and the purpose. It will be expected of you, my son, that as you are favored with superior advantages under the instructive eye of a tender parent, your improvement should bear some proportion to your advantages. Nothing is wanting with you but attention, diligence, and steady application. Nature has not been deficient. And you'll notice we're going to hone in on the blue text. And so before we begin, I want to warn us, we don't want to just like zoom in on one particular word right now, because if we did that, we might miss something. So for example, if we zoomed in on Tinder parent, without the context that's kind of surrounding it, we might think, oh, she's calling herself like a affectionate Tinder parent, but she's actually referring to her husband, so her and her husband in this, and not just her. And so that would be important to note, and we would need to use the context to determine that. So first, when it comes to the writer, it tells us that she and her husband value giving him some support and that they are there. They value supporting him. And we see that with the instructive eye of a Tinder parent, the fact that he is there under that instructive eye of a Tinder parent, her husband or his father. And so we know that they both value supporting him. The other part that stands out to me is as you are favored with superior advantages. Now, if I took this out of context, I might just think that he is privileged or spoiled or gets whatever he wants. But when we look at it in terms of the rest of the passage, he's been given privileges because his father is there with him. He's under his instructive eye, able to guide him. So she is really saying that he is currently experiencing privilege because he has a father to look after him. And so really what she's doing is trying to build confidence in her son, to say, you know what, you are safe. Yes, there are some challenges, but you are safe. And so let's take a look at some of these questions. So for the writer, we need to ask ourselves, what does this example suggest about the writer's values, beliefs, or need? We notice that she kind of is providing additional, I'm just going to bullet point these, additional guidance and care for him. And she does that through the language, my son, and that he's under the instructive eye of a Tinder parent, her husband, like we are here for you. That's kind of what she's saying. And for the audience, the question is, what does this example suggest about the audience's values, beliefs, or needs, about the writer's perceptions of these values? Why might it be persuasive? We note that she's already told him you are experiencing superior advantages. So he is experiencing privilege and safety while abroad. And that ultimately what she's trying to do to the audience here is she is trying to provoke a sense of confidence in her son, and she's doing that by continuing to remind him that you are safe, you are favored with superior advantages under the instructive eye of the Tinder parent, your father. So again, she's trying to provoke that sense of confidence because we already know, context-wise, that he was reluctant to go on this journey in the first place. For the purpose, how does this example relate to the writer's purpose? How does it contribute to the purpose? Really, what she is doing is she is saying that the challenges and the difficulties he is safe. That they might seem overwhelming, these challenges, but ultimately, like, you are okay is essentially what she's saying. And again, she's trying to promote instill this idea of confidence. All right, similar to what we just did with example 1, and yes, you should have gotten those notes down. You can always replay the video if you need to. You are going to attempt number 2 and number 3. Number 4, the mastery check, is very similar, so please make sure that you are kind of doing what we just did, talking through these examples and really using writer, audience, and purpose in these questions to guide your thinking about why is she using these specific phrases or words, and how do these examples suggest more about either the writer's values and beliefs or the audience's values and beliefs and her ultimate purpose. All right, I am available in Classroom Live, so if you have questions, feel free to chat or ask them out loud. I am always available to help you as you go. All right, good luck.